Hello. Mia here. You think you know how the story ends, don't you? Let me tell you, you have no idea. After years of being silenced, erased from my own life, I've finally decided to take control. But what happens when the truth comes crashing down, and your family, your own blood, turns on you? I wish I could say it's all been easy, but the real fight, the real battle, is just beginning. Stay with me. It's going to get messy. The evening sun cast a warm glow across my apartment, a soft amber light that felt out of place with the coldness creeping into my chest. After a long day at work, I sank into my armchair, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My fingers fumbled with the phone in my hand, mindlessly scrolling, when a notification popped up. It was from Callista. My sister. I paused, staring at the screen, my heartbeat suddenly loud in my ears. The message was a picture, of her, of course, beaming in front of what looked like the venue for her wedding. Isn't it just perfect? Can't wait for the big day. The words stung, and the ache in my chest deepened. I glanced at the calendar on my phone. My wedding was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. But Callista had already taken center stage. I shouldn't have been surprised. Callista had always been the one to outshine me. The perfect daughter. The one everyone doted on. I had spent my whole life in her shadow, fighting for scraps of attention, for any shred of validation. But this was too much. I wasn't just in her shadow now, I was being erased. I scrolled through more messages, and my fingers froze on a group chat. It was from my mom. Hey, sweetie, I know you're disappointed, but we can't fund this wedding. It's just too ordinary. You deserve better, Mia. Trust us on this. The words blurred as I read them over and over. My wedding. Cancelled. Deemed too ordinary by the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My stomach twisted, nausea rising up in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the walls of my apartment were closing in on me. Why? Why now? I couldn't even manage to cry. Instead, I stood there, motionless, phone in hand, feeling like I was in a dream. Or maybe it wasn't a dream. Maybe it was a nightmare. My family had been pulling the strings on my entire life for so long, and now they had cut the rope. Just like that. My knuckles whitened around the phone as I stood there, staring at the screen. There was no way back. No way to unring this bell. My wedding wasn't happening. The family I had always tried to please had made it clear, I wasn't enough. I walked to the window, the street below bustling with life, while inside, I felt frozen. I could still hear the voices from the group chat echoing in my mind. Their words were like daggers, but they didn't even know how deep they were cutting. Understood, I typed quickly, trying to calm my shaking hands. I didn't know why I even bothered to reply. It didn't matter. It wasn't enough. Nothing ever was. I sent the message and tossed the phone onto the couch. The empty apartment felt more suffocating than ever. The space I once thought of as my sanctuary had become a prison, a reminder of all the ways I had been shut out. I didn't cry. Instead, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to beg them. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. This was it. The last time. They thought I'd come crawling back, that I'd beg for their forgiveness, that I'd be the same Mia, always doing things the right way. But I wasn't. I was done. I've been erased. I turned toward the door, the weight of what I had to do settling on my shoulders. I had to stop being the person they made me. No more. I didn't cry. Instead, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. The phone sat on the table, untouched, as the buzzing from the previous notifications faded into the background. I had already read every message. They were all the same, Mia, please. You don't understand. I had heard the words too many times before. Each message felt more like a slap in the face than an apology. I pushed the phone away and sat back in my chair, letting the silence settle around me. The apartment, once a comforting space, felt empty, and it wasn't just the lack of family in it. There was a weight I could not shake, something heavy that sat in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't even feel my fingers as I ran them across the wedding invitations that now seemed like a cruel joke. Too ordinary. The words echoed in my mind, getting louder with each passing moment. I wasn't just hurt. I was disappearing, erased from the plans I had spent months building. The life I thought I was creating, the one that was supposed to mark the beginning of something beautiful, had been dismissed as nothing more than an inconvenience to my family. The truth stung more than I cared to admit. I had always been the one to make things work, the responsible daughter, the reliable one. I had taken on the weight of the world for them, kept my mouth shut when my dreams were buried beneath their expectations. But now, I was done. Done living their version of me. I stood and walked to the window, the dim light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the room. It was a beautiful view, one I had never taken the time to truly appreciate. I could see the whole city sprawled before me, the twinkling lights of Los Angeles glowing faintly as the sun dipped behind the horizon. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something, a tiny spark of freedom, a glimpse of what life could be like without the chains of their judgment. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone again. I hesitated, but only for a second. Understood, I typed, hitting send before I could second-guess myself. That was it. No more pleading. No more explanations. I was moving on. I had spent so many years desperately trying to be seen, to prove I was worth something to them, but this would be different. This time, I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I was going to create my own future, with or without them. I sank back into the chair, a feeling of calm resolve replacing the numbness I had been carrying. The decision wasn't easy, but it was final. My family might have erased me from their plans, but I wasn't going to let that happen to my life. I still had me. And for the first time in a long while, that felt enough. I looked at the clock. It was already late, but I wasn't ready for bed. There was still too much on my mind. I stood up again, pacing the room as I fought off the restless energy building inside me. Everything in my life had been shaped by the choices of others, by their expectations of who I was supposed to be. But that had changed now. I was stepping away from the role I had played in their drama. The obedient daughter. The one who had always done what was asked without question. No longer. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I stopped pacing and picked up my phone again, this time looking up venues for my own wedding, a new one. The one that was for me. Not for them. Not for anyone else but me. The realization felt powerful, as if I was starting to take control of something I had always believed was out of reach. I could create my own future. The phone rang again. It was Mom. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the decline button. I couldn't bring myself to answer. I didn't have the energy to listen to her excuses anymore. I wasn't the girl who needed them to fix things. I wasn't the girl who needed to go back and beg them for love. No. This time, I was the one in charge of my own narrative. I let the phone ring through to voicemail and set it down again. The decision was made. The power wasn't in their hands anymore. It was mine. I could feel my pulse steady as I breathed in deeply. This was my life, and I wasn't going to let it slip away just because they couldn't see me for who I was. I was more than their expectations. More than their dreams for me. I was me. And I was going to make it count. The weight of the decision settled over me like a thick fog. It was suffocating, overwhelming, but also strangely familiar. I hadn't expected it to hit me this hard. As I sat there in my apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city outside, I couldn't help but feel like a stranger in my own life. Everything felt foreign, like I was wearing someone else's skin, walking through a life I had once known but no longer recognized. I was no longer just Mia, the girl who had tried so hard to be everything for everyone. I was about to take charge of my life in a way I had never done before, and for the first time, it felt real. The decision to fight my family wasn't just about the money or the property. It wasn't even about the wedding anymore. No, this was about something deeper. It was about justice, about reclaiming the self-respect I had lost in their shadow, about standing tall in the face of everything they had tried to do to break me. I stared at my phone, hesitating for a moment. The messages from them still lay unanswered on the screen. They had begged me to forgive them, to come back to the fold, but how could I? How could I let them back into my life after everything they had done to me? They had stripped me of everything. They had made me feel like I was nothing, like I was less than them. I hadn't been invited to my own wedding, the day that was supposed to be mine, and now they were acting like I was the one in the wrong. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung anymore, it was the sheer audacity. My family had used me, manipulated me, and now it was time to fight back. There was no other choice. I wasn't going to let them win this time. The phone buzzed again, and this time it wasn't from them. It was a message from Tom, my lawyer. He had been in contact with me all week, guiding me through the maze of legalities. His words had become a lifeline, a source of steady support when I had felt lost in the chaos of it all. We've got to move fast, Mia. I'm reviewing everything we have, but they're preparing to counterattack. We need to be ready. The words hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't just a disagreement between family members, this was war. The power of the court was about to pit me against them, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. No more hesitation. No more second guessing. This was it. I looked at the pile of papers on the table in front of me, the mess of documents that represented all I had left, the legal papers, photos of the wedding I never got to have, old family photos that now felt like relics of a time that didn't belong to me anymore, and the forged will. Everything I had left was in these pages. But the most important part, the part one hadn't yet found, was still out there. It was the final piece of the puzzle, the truth that would expose them for who they really were. They have to pay for what they did, I whispered to myself, more for reassurance than anything else. My heart pounded in my chest. It was time, I thought. It's time to get everything back. I wasn't going to let them steal what was mine, not anymore. I wasn't going to let them erase me from my own life. I grabbed my coat, the weight of the decision settling deeper into my bones. The air outside was cold, biting, but it was exactly what I needed. I needed that chill, that rawness, to keep me grounded. If I didn't stay focused, if I didn't keep my eye on the prize, I knew the stakes would get too high. I had to remember why I was doing this. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for my dignity, for my right to exist without their influence. I wasn't going to let them control me any longer. The law office had never felt colder. The room was sleek, sterile, all sharp edges and polished surfaces. It was a world I had never quite belonged to, a world that felt too clinical for someone who had spent her life in the shadows of her family's expectations. I felt out of place at first, like I was stepping into a role I wasn't sure I could play. But as soon as I took my seat across from Tom, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, confidence. The room felt less intimidating now. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was in control. And for the first time, that felt like enough. You okay? Tom asked, his voice calm but knowing. He had been the one to guide me through this process, the one who understood just how difficult this was for me. He knew the stakes were personal, that every document, every piece of evidence, held a part of me I had to expose to the world. I nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. I'm ready, I said, even though the nerves were crawling beneath the surface. I had to say the words, even if I didn't believe them just yet. I had to convince myself first, because if I didn't, I knew I would falter. Good, he said, flipping through the documents on his desk, the rustle of the papers filling the quiet room. We need to be ready for them to pull every trick they've got. They'll do anything to make you look bad. And trust me, Vera is already preparing a counterclaim, but we've got the evidence. His words hung in the air, but they didn't scare me. Instead, they solidified my resolve. This wasn't just a battle for money or property. It was a battle for who I was. For the chance to say that I mattered. They had tried to erase me from the story, to turn me into something small, something insignificant, but now, I was rewriting it. Tom slid a thick envelope across the table toward me. I opened it slowly, my hand steady now, my heart thumping in my chest. Inside, there were the documents I had been waiting for, the proof of what had happened to my inheritance. The counterfeit signatures. The fraud. It was all there, and it was undeniable. This is it, I said softly, almost as if I was speaking to myself. This is everything. Tom nodded, his face set in the grim determination I had come to trust. This will make the difference, Mia. The truth is finally on your side. They can't hide anymore. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief, the weight of the burden I had been carrying lifting just slightly. But before I could fully let it in, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, and my blood ran cold. It was a message from Vera. The message was brief, but it was enough to throw me off. I know what you're doing. You don't want to do this. Come back to us. You're still our daughter. For a moment, the words stung. It was as though she thought I'd come crawling back, that her words still had some hold over me. But then, I remembered something I had forgotten for so long. I didn't need her to validate me anymore. I didn't need her or anyone else. I silenced my phone, slipping it back into my purse. I wasn't answering anymore. I had nothing left to say to her. This battle wasn't just about money or family. It was about my right to be free, my right to exist on my own terms. As I walked out of the office, I looked up at the sky. The city lights of Los Angeles shimmered in the distance, but they didn't seem so far away anymore. I had started this fight on my own, and I would finish it the same way. The power I needed to take back my life was already inside me. I didn't need anyone to give it to me. I had it all along. The courtroom was cold, colder than I had expected. I could feel the tension in the air before I even stepped inside. It was almost suffocating, but I didn't let it show. Today, I wasn't the girl trying to fit in, the daughter begging for her family's love. Today, I was a fighter. The truth was finally in my hands, and there was no turning back. I stepped through the heavy wooden doors, the sound echoing off the walls, a stark reminder that this was real. The floor creaked beneath my feet as I made my way to the plaintiff's table, where my lawyer, Tom, was already waiting. His briefcase was open, papers neatly stacked in front of him. He looked up and gave me a small nod, his way of telling me he was with me in this. I returned a quick, tight smile. My heart was pounding, but I kept it together. I glanced across the room. My mother and sister sat at the defendant's table, both looking more put together than ever. Vera, my mother, always dressed to the nines, her pearls shining like a badge of superiority, and Callista, my sister, the golden child, always the favorite, always the one everyone thought was perfect. Today, they were acting like this was just another regular day. But I knew the truth. Today was the day I took back everything they had stolen from me. I sat down at the table, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on my chest. Tom handed me a thick stack of documents, evidence, all of it. The forged will, the bank transfers, everything. It was all there. The lies, the manipulation, the years of me being invisible to them, the way they treated me like a pawn in their game. But now, I wasn't playing their game anymore. I was rewriting the rules. Tom leaned in and whispered, "You've got this, Mia. Let's make sure they don't walk away from this." His words grounded me, and I nodded, my mind running through everything we had prepared. This wasn't just a trial about money. It was about who I was, and today, I was going to make sure they knew. The court began, and the judge called for order. The room went silent, and I could hear the faint shuffle of papers, the low murmur of the audience. It felt like all eyes were on me. But I wasn't going to shrink away from this. I was going to stand tall, finally free from their control. My mother's lawyer stood first, walking confidently to the front, his sharp suit matching the coldness of the room. He began to speak, laying out the defense, claiming this was all a misunderstanding. They'd done nothing wrong, they said. The forged will was nothing more than a mistake, and all the money transferred was for family purposes. I could feel the lies rolling off his tongue, but I wasn't going to let it slide. Not anymore. When it was my turn, I stood, my legs shaking slightly, but I held my head high. This was it. I walked to the stand, taking a deep breath before looking out at the faces of the jury, my family, and everyone else in the room. My heart was racing, but I didn't let it stop me. I wasn't here to beg. I wasn't here to apologize for being who I was. I was here to make them see me. Really see me. I took the oath and sat down, my palms sweating as I gripped the edge of the stand. I had to be strong now. I had to show them that I wasn't the little girl they had always ignored. "Mia," the prosecutor called, his voice cutting through the tension. "Could you please explain to the court the nature of the documents we have here today? The forged will and the bank transactions." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every word I was about to say. The next few minutes would determine everything. I wasn't just talking about money, I was talking about years of mistreatment, of being erased. I looked directly at my mother and sister before speaking. I've spent my entire life being overlooked, told what to do, what to want, what to dream. But this is where I draw the line, I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. I paused to gather myself. I wasn't just left out of my wedding. I was erased from my own family story. The will they forged? It was their way of making sure I would never have a say, that I would never have control over my own life. The room was silent. I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. I wasn't just exposing their lies, I was reclaiming myself. I looked back at the jury. This isn't just about money. It's about respect. It's about dignity. It's about taking back what they tried to take from me. I felt a shiver run through me, but this time it wasn't fear. It was empowerment. I wasn't afraid anymore. The defense attorney stood up, objecting loudly. His words were sharp, trying to twist my statements into something else, but I didn't care anymore. The truth was out. There was no hiding it. Then, just as I thought we were winning, there was a sudden shift. My mother's lawyer presented new evidence, a counterclaim. A letter from my father, who had passed away years ago, supposedly stating that he had always intended for Callista to inherit the property, and that I was never to be involved. I froze. My heart sank. This wasn't in the plan. The room was thrown into chaos as Vera's lawyer smirked. He had played his last card, and for a moment, I thought it might be too much. I turned to Tom, my face pale, but he placed a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it. "Don't panic. We're ready for this." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let them win. Not now. Not ever. The day after the hearing, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world had tilted on its axis. I had left the courthouse with my head held high, but my thoughts were spiraling. The first day of the trial was over, but the weight of what had just happened had yet to sink in fully. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow, like there was a storm just waiting to break. I knew the battle wouldn't end after one day. This was just the beginning. I was already mentally exhausted, and that was before I even began to think about what tomorrow would bring. The apartment was eerily silent when I walked in. The faint hum of the city outside seeped through the window, but inside, everything felt still. The soft glow from the lamp on the table illuminated the papers scattered in front of me. Documents, contracts, photos. The things I'd worked so hard for, and yet they seemed like nothing more than a pile of reminders of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I didn't know what I expected when I walked into that courtroom. Maybe a small part of me thought I would finally be able to get closure, some kind of finality. But what I'd learned was this wasn't just about the inheritance or the house or the forged will. No, it was bigger than that. This was about me. About reclaiming everything they had taken from me. My dignity. My voice. My life. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before picking up the phone. I had to call Tom, my lawyer. I had to keep going, even though every fiber of my being screamed to give up. "Mia?" His voice came through the line, calm but with a hint of concern. "Yeah, it's me," I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I just wanted to check in, see if there's anything else we need to go over before tomorrow." "You did great today, Mia. I know it's hard. You're stronger than you think." I almost laughed, but it came out as more of a bitter chuckle. "Stronger? I don't feel strong." The silence stretched between us for a second, and then he spoke again. "The truth is on your side. We've got a solid case, but I need you to stay strong. The other side is going to push everything they've got tomorrow." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Tomorrow, I thought. More pushing. More manipulation. More of them trying to twist the truth to fit their story. They thought they could control me. Make me small. But not anymore. I had a voice now. I wasn't backing down. I thanked Tom, ending the call before sitting back in my chair, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. I had spent years being someone else's idea of who I should be, constantly trying to fit into their mold. But now, I was starting to realize something I'd been avoiding for so long. This wasn't just about fighting for money. This was about fighting for me, for everything they had stolen from me. I stood and walked over to the desk, looking at the documents I had collected. The forged signatures, the email exchanges, the evidence of financial manipulation. The more I looked at it, the clearer it became. This wasn't a simple case of a will being contested. This was a case of a family that had used me, lied to me, and tried to break me. But not anymore. A loud knock at the door startled me, and I jumped, my heart racing. I walked toward the door, opening it slowly. Standing there was Lucas, an old friend of mine, the one person who had always been in my corner when the world felt like it was falling apart. His easy smile was a welcome relief from the tension that had been suffocating me for days. "Hey, Mia. Mind if I come in?" I stepped aside, letting him in, and as he walked past me, I could see the concern written all over his face. He had been with me through the last few years, seeing me go through all the ups and downs with my family, silently watching as I tried to keep the peace. "How's the trial going?" Lucas asked, sitting down on the couch. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on me. "I've been hearing bits and pieces, but I know it's got to be tough. It's harder than I thought." I took a deep breath, trying to keep it together. It's not just about the money anymore. It's about them trying to erase me. Trying to make me disappear. Lucas didn't respond at first. He just nodded, understanding without needing to say much. He had seen me lose myself before, put my family's needs ahead of my own, and he knew how badly I needed to take control of my life again. I know it's tough, he said quietly. But you've got this. You're stronger than you realize, Mia. They can't break you. His words were simple but carried a weight of truth that made my heart tighten in my chest. Could I really do this? Could I really stand up to them? I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe I was stronger than I thought. But every time I looked at my family, I saw the same faces, the ones that had betrayed me, the ones that had made me feel small for so long. But I also saw the ones that would never understand. I don't know how much more of this I can take. I swallowed hard, trying not to let my emotions get the best of me. They want me to fold. They think I'll cave. You won't, Lucas said, his voice firm. Because you're done with them. You're done with their lies. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. It was the first time I had said it aloud. I was done with them. The family I had spent so many years trying to please didn't deserve my time or energy anymore. And now, the law was going to take care of it. I'm done, I said again, this time louder, more decisive. They've taken everything from me, but they won't take my future. Lucas gave me a reassuring smile, and I could see the pride in his eyes. That's the Mia I know. As he left, I closed the door behind him, the quiet of the apartment settling around me. The weight was lifting, but the road ahead was still long. Tomorrow, the trial would continue, and I had no idea what new surprises awaited me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could stand up for myself, no matter what came next. I had to take a moment before I could pick up the phone again. The weight of the day had settled heavily in my chest, a quiet suffocation. The reality of what I was doing, of the battle I had just begun, started to feel real, like a force too strong to ignore. I wasn't just fighting for money or property. I wasn't even just fighting for the house, or for what was rightfully mine. No, this was a fight for my soul, my voice, my dignity. For far too long, I had allowed my family to dictate my worth, to shape who I was and who I would become. Every decision they made had been about control over my happiness, my choices, and even my future. Now, for the first time in years, I was taking it back, no matter the cost. I reached for the phone. My hands were shaking, betraying the inner turmoil I was trying to suppress. I forced myself to steady them. I had to make this call. I didn't want to make it, but I had no choice. It was time to face the truth. I had to talk to Tom, my lawyer, the one person who had stood beside me in this fight from the beginning. He was the one who had helped me find the courage to confront my family. Now, he would help me prepare for the battle of my life. Picking up the phone felt surreal, like I was stepping into someone else's shoes, someone who had the strength, the courage, that I wasn't sure I had anymore. But I did it anyway. I called him. I didn't have a choice. Mia? Tom's voice came through the phone, warm but cautious, like he knew what was coming. How are you holding up? I pressed my lips together, feeling the weight of his question sit like a stone in my stomach. How was I holding up? What did that even mean anymore? My entire world had been flipped upside down. I'm still standing, I said, my voice sounding stronger than I felt. I tried to believe the words, tried to convince myself that I was still the same person I used to be, but the cracks were showing. But I need to be prepared. They've upped the stakes. Tom paused for a moment, his voice dropping lower. We knew they would. Your mother's already putting together a counterclaim. This is going to get nasty, Mia. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. There it was. The confirmation. It was getting uglier, more personal. More dangerous. I'm not backing down, Tom. Not this time. I've lost everything because of them. I can't lose myself too. Good, he said, his tone sharpening, reassuring me like he always did. We're ready for this. But you need to stay focused. This is not just about the money. This is about who gets to control your life. His words hit harder than I expected. The truth of them settled deep inside me. This wasn't just about surviving the battle. It was about reclaiming my life, my voice, my identity. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't just some pawn in their game anymore. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I wasn't sure if I could take this fight all the way, but I had no other choice. Not anymore. This wasn't just about standing up to my family, it was about standing up for me. The real me. The one I had buried for so long. After I ended the call, I sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on everything that had led me here. How many times had I been silent in the face of their criticism, their manipulation? How many times had I swallowed my voice, put my life on hold, hoping that one day, they would finally see me for who I was? How many times had I waited for their approval, for their acceptance? But today was different. Today, I wasn't asking for their approval. I wasn't pleading for their love or their understanding. I was demanding justice. I wasn't the person I had been when I first walked into their shadow. No, I had changed. I had learned. And I was ready to fight for what was mine. I stood up and walked over to the window, staring out at the skyline. Los Angeles stretched out before me, bright and cold, like a reflection of my life right now. Everything was moving forward around me, while I stood still, holding on to what little I had left. It was like the city itself was reminding me that there was no going back. Only forward. I looked down at the pile of legal papers on the coffee table, documents that had once seemed like a foreign language to me, but now felt like the only thing that mattered. The forged will. The bank documents. The emails and receipts that proved they had used my inheritance to pay off their own debts. They thought they could get away with it. They thought I would stay silent. But not anymore. The knock on the door startled me. I walked toward it, my heart thudding in my chest. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, not knowing what to expect, but knowing I wasn't alone anymore. There stood Lucas, my longtime friend, the one person who had always been there for me in ways my family never was. His smile was warm, but there was something else in his eyes, an unease, a quiet understanding of what I was going through. He stepped inside without a word, knowing better than to ask. We had never really needed words between us. Sometimes, just being together in silence was enough. "How's the trial going?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm, like he was trying to keep things grounded. I sank back onto the couch, exhaling slowly. "It's worse than I thought," I said, my voice thick with frustration. "They're playing dirty, Lucas. They've pulled out everything, including my past, to make me look like the bad guy." Lucas sat beside me, his expression serious, matching the weight of my words. "I know, Mia. But you're not going to let them win, right? You've got more strength than you give yourself credit for." I looked at him, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest, the swirling emotions threatening to break through. "I don't know how much longer I can keep fighting. They've got so much power I can't even begin to fight." "You can fight. And you will," Lucas said softly, but his words were certain, unwavering. He reached over and took my hand, a gesture of solidarity, something I hadn't realized I needed until that moment. I didn't know when I had started to believe that I was all alone in this fight, but Lucas reminded me that I wasn't. "This isn't just about a fight, Mia. It's about reclaiming your life." His words sank deep into me, like a lifeline thrown when I had almost given up. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope, a reminder that maybe I wasn't as powerless as I'd been feeling. "I won't let them break me," I whispered, more to myself than to him. Later that night, after Lucas left, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of my broken dreams. The pile of legal papers still lay on the coffee table, but now, they didn't seem so daunting. They were a weapon, a tool for my fight, not a reminder of all I had lost. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, what the next day, the next week, or the next month would look like. But I knew one thing with certainty: I would never let them take control of me again. Not ever. As I walked into the courtroom, the familiar weight of the world pressed down on me. I had expected the tension to ease, but the closer I got to the stand, the heavier it felt. My palms were sweaty, but my grip on the briefcase was firm. Today wasn't just about family anymore. This was about everything I had fought for. This was my fight. The first day had been full of false promises and lies. I could see the manipulation in my mother's eyes, her coldness, her constant need to make herself the center of everything. And Callista? She sat there, smug and silent, as if the world was still her stage. But it wasn't anymore. Today, it was my turn to speak. I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, the cold wood beneath my fingertips grounding me. The murmur of the room faded as I settled into my thoughts. The truth had come out in bits and pieces, but today, it was all going to come crashing down. The jury had to see this for what it was, a family tearing itself apart to get what it wanted. To control me, to erase me. I could hear the shuffling of papers as the opposing attorney stood up. He was confident, his polished words flowing like water. He had rehearsed every single one of them. Your Honor, we are here because my client, Mia's mother, is being wrongly accused of mishandling financial affairs. This case is rooted in personal vendettas, not facts. I clenched my fists under the table. Personal vendettas? They didn't get to turn the tables on me again. I wasn't the villain here. I was the one whose entire life had been molded by their expectations. I had been the dutiful daughter, the one who didn't rock the boat, the one who never said no. And now, here I was, fighting to take back the one thing they had stolen from me. My identity. I straightened in my seat, watching my mother carefully. Her eyes were sharp, but there was something else there too, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. I had grown up under her watchful gaze, never allowed to make a mistake. Now, the roles were reversed. The judge called for order, and my attorney stood. He looked at me briefly, offering me a reassuring nod. It was time. I stood up, my legs feeling like they might give out from beneath me, but I kept my head high. This was it. I walked to the stand, my heels clicking sharply against the floor, the noise echoing through the otherwise silent room. The jury's eyes were on me, but I barely noticed them. All I could focus on was the one person I had to face, my mother. When I reached the stand, I sat down slowly, trying to steady my breathing. The weight of the moment was almost too much to bear, but I knew this was my only chance. Mia, we've been through this already. This is not the time to make accusations. My mother's voice came through the air, like a sharp blade cutting through the tension. But I wasn't backing down. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say. This isn't about accusations, I said, the words leaving my mouth with more force than I expected. I wasn't trying to destroy her, but I couldn't let her walk away with everything. This is about the truth. I paused, gathering myself. The whole world felt like it was resting on my next words. I don't care about the money anymore. You've already taken what's most important. But I'm not going to let you control my life any longer. You can't hide the truth, not this time. I looked directly at her. Her face remained calm, but I saw it, just a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She couldn't hide it anymore. She couldn't lie to me, not today. The opposing attorney stood to object, but I didn't care. I was done with them. I was done being a victim. This was my time to speak, to finally take control of my own life. My father's estate was never just about inheritance. It was about control, I continued. You didn't just take my inheritance, you took my freedom, my voice. And for what? So you could continue running this charade? To keep Callista in the spotlight while I was erased? My throat tightened, but I didn't back down. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. I wasn't going to give them that power over me anymore. Vera's lawyer rose quickly. Your Honor, this is nonsense. These are just personal claims with no legal standing. But the judge didn't even let him finish. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Adams. My attorney, Tom, nodded at me as I returned to my seat. But my stomach was in knots. I knew the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There was still so much more to uncover, so many more lies they could hide behind. The rest of the day was a blur of motions and objections. But one thing was clear. They were shaking. They were scared. They knew the tide was turning. They knew that the truth was about to be exposed, and no matter how hard they tried to twist it, I was going to make sure it came out. At the end of the day, as the jury was dismissed, I felt a sense of quiet victory. I wasn't sure how this would end, but I was no longer just fighting for money. I was fighting for something far more important, my dignity, my future, my life. And they couldn't take that from me. The courtroom doors felt heavier than usual as I walked through them, my hands clenched at my sides. My body felt like it was made of stone, but my heart was racing in my chest. This was it. The final day of the trial, the last chance to make sure my family couldn't rewrite my life. It was my moment. I looked around at the familiar, sterile surroundings. The cold, gray walls. The distant hum of the air conditioning. The courtrooms, the place where dreams went to die, or where they were reborn. And I was here to make sure mine came back to life. I couldn't look at my mother or Callista just yet, but I knew they were there, across from me, their eyes cold and calculating. They were still trying to convince the world that I was the problem, that they were the victims. But I wouldn't let them. The tension was palpable, thick in the air. The judge took his seat, and the murmur of the courtroom died down. My heart thudded in my chest, but I wasn't going to let that stop me. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. Mia, Tom, my attorney, said quietly as he placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. This is it. We're ready for this. Just focus on the truth. I nodded, my lips pressed into a thin line. The weight of everything, the years of being ignored, the years of living in their shadow, had led me to this moment. I wasn't going to let them take it from me now. I took my seat at the witness stand, trying not to let my nerves show. The spotlight was on me, and I knew this was the moment when everything changed. My mother's lawyer stood up, ready to launch into his usual spiel, but this time, it wasn't going to work. This time, I was in control. Your Honor, he began, his voice dripping with practiced politeness. We are here today because Mia's accusations are baseless. She has been manipulated by outside influences, and we can prove it. My client, Vera, has always acted in the best interest of her family. This case is an unfortunate misunderstanding. I could barely contain the laugh that threatened to bubble up. Best interest of her family? That was rich. If this was her best interest, then she had made a hell of a mess of it. I object. My attorney's voice cut through the air, his words firm. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a deliberate attempt to strip my client of her inheritance and manipulate the truth. We have evidence that proves otherwise. I glanced at my family. Vera sat there, poised, her hands neatly folded in her lap, her face a mask of composure. Callista, sitting beside her, stared straight ahead, pretending as though nothing was at stake. They weren't even remotely shaken. They thought this was still their game. But it wasn't anymore. Your Honor, I spoke, interrupting the defense's lawyer as he tried to go on, I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here because they destroyed me. I spent my whole life being told who I should be, what I should do. And I'm done. The room went still. I could feel the weight of the words settle over me, like a heavy blanket that had been weighing me down for years, suddenly lifted. The truth wasn't just out in the open. It was alive, and I was finally ready to let it breathe. I've never been allowed to be myself. I continued, my voice steady but strong. My inheritance, my future, it wasn't just taken from me. It was erased. My family didn't just ignore me. They wished me away. And I'm done with it. I looked directly at my mother, who was now staring at me as though I had slapped her. Callista shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but I didn't care. This was it. I wasn't the meek daughter anymore. I wasn't the quiet one who kept quiet for the sake of peace. I was here for justice, for my life. I've done everything for them. But no more. The words came out of me with a force I hadn't known I had. I wasn't going to apologize for finally standing up for myself. The defense's lawyer stood abruptly, trying to throw his objections at me, but the judge raised his hand. Enough. We've heard enough. The jury will deliberate after the final presentation of evidence. This is a serious matter. I could feel the shift in the air. The energy was changing. There was a shift in the balance, and I could feel it in my bones. This was the moment I had been waiting for. This was when everything changed. And then it happened. Just as I thought the case was wrapping up, my attorney was about to present our final piece of evidence, a confession letter I had found, when Vera's lawyer jumped in with a bombshell. Your Honor, he called out with an unexpected urgency, we have a surprise witness. A witness who can provide new evidence that calls Mia's claims into question. A loud gasp went up in the courtroom, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't what we had prepared for. I stared at my lawyer, trying to stay calm, but my mind was racing. Tom turned to me, his face grim. Don't worry, Mia. We'll handle it. Just stay focused. But this wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. I had made it. I was standing at the edge of everything I had been fighting for, ready to take the final step. The courtroom felt even colder than it had the day before. The buzz of the air conditioning hummed in the background, but it couldn't drown out the silent tension that filled the room. This was the end, the culmination of everything, the fight for justice, for my life, and for my dignity. The room was full, everyone holding their breath, waiting for what was to come. My family was still sitting across from me, faces hard and tight with forced composure. But I could feel it, they were rattled. They had thought they could control everything, manipulate the truth to fit their version of the story. But now, the truth was out. I had seen it through the fog, and now, I would bring it into the light. I stood tall at the plaintiff's table, my lawyer Tom beside me. His eyes met mine, steady and firm, a silent confirmation that this was the moment we had been working toward. The judge called for order and the courtroom settled into an uneasy silence. I felt the weight of my family's betrayal settle on my shoulders again, but I didn't flinch. This time, I wasn't their victim. I was the one in control. As the opposing lawyer began to speak, the words seemed like a blur, their defense crumbling under the weight of our evidence. I could hear him spinning his web of lies, just like the first day of the trial. They didn't want to lose. They couldn't lose. They had built their lives on control, and now, everything was slipping away. Your Honor, the defense lawyer said, his voice cold, his eyes flicking nervously toward me. This case is nothing but a vendetta. There's no real claim here. We'll prove that this is all one big misunderstanding. I wanted to laugh. The nerve. A misunderstanding? How many years of my life had been a misunderstanding, my entire existence reduced to nothing more than an afterthought? How many times had I been overlooked, silenced, and forced into the background of my own life? This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a well-planned betrayal. But I didn't speak. I just let him continue, waiting for my moment. Finally, it was my turn. I stood, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, but my heart was steady. I walked to the stand, keeping my head high, and took my seat. I could feel the eyes of the jury on me, and for a brief moment, the fear tried to creep up my spine. But then I remembered, this was my fight. The truth would speak for itself. I glanced briefly at Vera and Callista. I could see the thin veneer of their composure cracking. They hadn't expected me to be this strong. They hadn't expected me to stand up and claim the truth. The judge gave me a nod, signaling that I could speak. And I did. Your Honor, I began, my voice calm but unwavering, I stand here today not just to fight for what is mine. I stand here today because this family has tried to destroy me. They've manipulated me, used me, and now they're trying to erase me from the story of my own life. The courtroom went silent. My words hung in the air, heavy with the years of pain and injustice I had endured. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. This wasn't just about the will or the money, it was about taking back who I was. I paused, looking around at the faces in the room, making sure to lock eyes with my mother. I could see her jaw tighten, but I didn't flinch. She couldn't hide anymore. She couldn't pretend she had done nothing wrong. For years, I played the role you gave me. I did everything you asked of me. I gave up my dreams, my voice, and my future for you. But no more. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm taking back what's mine. I could feel a weight lifting from my chest with every word I spoke. The truth wasn't just cathartic, it was powerful. It was the weapon I had been holding inside me for so long, and now I was letting it shatter everything. I heard Vera's lawyer mumble something, but I didn't care. This wasn't about their lies anymore. It was about my truth, and the truth was stronger than any lie they could tell. Just as I finished speaking, the defense lawyer raised his hand, his face a mask of frustration. Your Honor, we object, he said, his voice tight. This is purely emotional testimony with no legal merit. There is no proof to back these claims. I could feel my heartbeat quicken, but I didn't let the fear show. I had proof. I had all the proof I needed. Tom stood up beside me, holding up the final piece of evidence, the letter from Callista. Your Honor, this letter proves that Callista was involved in forging the documents and manipulating the will. We found proof that the defendant, Vera, had her hands all over the documents, and this letter is the smoking gun we've been waiting for. The room fell completely silent. I could see Vera's face go pale, the last thread of composure she had left unraveling in front of her. Callista's mouth went dry as she realized what was happening. She had been so confident in her lies, but now they were crumbling. I looked over at the jury. I could see the doubt creeping into their minds, but I didn't look away. I held their gaze, steady. I was taking control. The defense lawyer jumped up again, arguing furiously, but the judge had already raised his hand. Enough. We'll take a short recess. The chaos that followed was nothing short of a storm. Vera was practically shaking, and Callista, I could see, was trying to pretend like it wasn't happening. But they both knew, the game was up. As the dust settles, the fight for justice and self-worth has just begun. Mia's story isn't just about reclaiming what was stolen, it's about finding the strength to take back your life, no matter the cost. So, what would you do if your family betrayed you? Could you stand up for yourself and fight back? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories of empowerment, personal growth, and overcoming adversity, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.